Ooh, that's a bit out of left field sort of question. Well, what sort of leader do I think I am or have been? Well, leadership I think is quite an interesting concept, and I could go on about it endlessly, particularly in terms of the difference between the differences between a manager and a leader. Obviously, there are similarities, but there are, I think, also some quite big differences, and I think that's always something I've been aware of to some degree. I I don't know. I think I've always known that I've had leadership potential right from very early on when I was a Boy Scout, really. But also, for some reason, I was probably a bit frustrated in that area because I often thought I could actually lead people and do something or achieve something with a group of people, but opportunities didn't really seem to come my way very often. So probably I didn't think to myself, there's something missing here that I maybe need to actually work on. I probably just thought that people weren't noticing my leadership potential. Yeah, probably what I was thinking back then. And generally, myself as a person I perceived as a leader type, even a manager, I suppose, but certainly a leader type person, wasn't part of my view of myself and my worldview of myself, really, until I got to university, I think. So that's not to say there weren't opportunities, and when I did actually take on a leadership role, I recall a few activities where I did actually get in there, and the group that I was in charge of or was working with, in fact, did pretty well. But I think it was partly due to my own working quite hard at what I was trying to achieve, and not necessarily bringing the group along and putting a lot of my own ideas into the picture. So quite interesting in terms of how I went about doing that. I might have talked about a few examples in my history, but overall, probably people didn't see me as leadership potential, and I didn't have that view. However, once I got to university, and I began to work with small groups in a range of ways, and of course in Youth Line, people began to ask me to take on various leadership roles, and gradually I began to see that in fact I was able to achieve that, and people were beginning to value it, and I became the chairperson of Youth Line, for example. I often led small groups in the university where we were doing projects. People often asked me if they would actually be, take the group or take the lead role. And incrementally, I began to see I could actually offer something to people in the way of leadership, and began to see myself as a person who could take that role on. A few people actually even began to encourage me. People like Paul Nielsen at university thought that whenever there was a project, had to be part of my team because we were going to get an A plus. That's probably right, but I think it was more than just the fact that I actually could often work out the ideas, but also I could help drive the team towards achieving that idea. Once I left university, went to training college, I guess the leadership role dropped off a little bit because I just did an ordinary job in university and an ordinary teaching job in the kindergarten, so the opportunities were a little less available. But I did become the club captain of the Cambridge Tennis Club, and again, clearly they'd seen that maybe I had something to offer in the way of being a bit of a leader there, and in fact it wasn't a position that was available, it was a position they actually wanted me to do. So yeah, I guess incrementally I began to see myself as a leader. Once I got into site service, of course, and special education service and so on, I quite quickly began to take on leadership roles, and encouraged by people like Pat Crowley and James Brodie and so on and so on. And again, I got the feeling they could see something that I could actually do, which probably I hadn't always thought of myself, but still had a little bit of confidence I could actually be a good leader. When I took my first leadership role on in site service, that was as, I guess, what you'd call the district psychologist sort of area psychologist role. Probably I was not a great leader. I was still probably pretty much following my own ideas and using my own, I guess, views to actually try and drive things. I wasn't necessarily looking at the people around me and getting a feel for what they could actually do, and trying to understand, what was it that I had to do to get them motivated. So, patchy leadership. But quite quickly, I think, I began to understand that To move on as a leader, what you've got to do is really look carefully at the people you're actually working with. If you don't know the people, if you don't understand them, if you don't work to their strengths, there's very little point in actually being a leader, because you won't get anywhere. So for some reason I began to twig to that. I had some pretty good professional development through the special ed years, in terms of people who offered courses and gave, I guess, ideas about what leadership might be. Read quite a lot of books and got pretty interested in it, actually. I thought that leadership is a really key thing in the job that I'm in there, and I'm going to do a good job of it. So I almost tried to look at it from a professional point of view. And from the professional point of view, I knew that leadership was really basically applied psychology. And once I had really twigged to that, then that was my way forward, I guess. So I was applying psychology in a leadership role, and I had to use things like evidence-based practice and feedback and all the things that psychologists use to try and make a difference in that role. And yep, I'm pretty sure that was probably the major insight I had in terms of being able to become an effective leader. The main benchmark I've used in recent years in terms of did that work was the ministry's 360-degree survey, which we put out once a year. And using that, I definitely saw, particularly in the last few years, an increase in the way that people perceive me as a leader. And I feel that in the end I was pretty successful, really. Even though I didn't really go to the high level of leadership, at the level I was at, I think I can say I really succeeded. And now, in terms of the question, what was the sorry about that, it's a bit long-winded, isn't it? But what was the actual how have I become a successful leader and continue to do that? I think first of all, I've become very aware of my abilities to have a vision, and to use that vision to actually try and have goals and to know where we're going. If you don't have a vision as a leader, again, you're wasting your time. So absolutely, vision is absolutely crucial. You've got to know where you're going and what the I guess will look like when you actually get there. So vision, number one. And I found that in fact when I've done various those silly survey things that you do in terms of where are your strengths, vision often comes out quite highly on mine. And not just vision, but also vision in terms of how you actually work in terms of getting a vision and using that. Probably my vision part of it came from just having a real interest in ideas and being able to have that lifelong passion for developing ideas and implementing them. Ideas and vision are not too separate from each other, and that was something I was able to really work on, I think, quite a lot. So ideas transformed into vision, and I was able to set up what was my vision for the team that I was leading, or the group I was leading, or whatever, and then try and work towards that. The next thing that probably I had to realise was it's fine to have a vision for me, but you have to actually be able to articulate it back to your team. And I did get feedback from some of my teams early on which said, well, we know you've got good ideas and that you've actually got a real passion and a vision here, but please tell us what it is and please explain it so that we actually understand it. That was good feedback, because once I had sort of got that, I realised I wasn't so great at actually that part of it. So I worked quite hard at actually working out ways to actually, I guess, tell the team or give the team a good idea about what my idea was, what the vision was, where we were going, and try and help them actually work through that. So that was an important part of my leadership growth and so on. Definitely got better at that. Probably not great at it still, not my major strength, but certainly I think I've improved and had to work on it. But apart from that, also probably my articulation of my vision has been always a little bit, as Sally would probably say, quirky or a little bit offbeat. And sometimes that's worked quite well. I've been able to get a bit of interest from a team in terms of my vision just through the way I've actually presented it, and I've got better at doing that too. So, number one, have the passion, have the vision, have the idea, and articulate it back to your team so they actually understand what you're trying to achieve or what you want the team to achieve. And then, of course, the second really big part of the whole thing is to actually know your team. And probably the bit I've had to struggle with the most over the years, but certainly you have to understand the people in your team, their strengths, and so on. And I guess the model of leadership that I've actually gravitated towards ultimately was one of me having the vision and a way of actually mapping where we're going and providing the feedback to the team in terms of how we're going, but then really working to empower people in the team to actually develop the strengths and the resources and the capability to actually achieve the vision. Probably a model which is a bit slower in practice in terms of if you're empowering, then you're actually trying to generate people's own enthusiasm and knowledge and skills and so on. But as an empowering model, I think that really is the one that is most effective. If people know where they need to go in terms of what the team goal is and feel empowered to achieve that and feel that they actually are being given opportunities to develop the skills and the expertise and that they're actually that the reliance is on them to actually work to achieve that with the tools that we've got and so on, then they're much more likely to get on board and ultimately much more likely to get there. But it is probably a little slower in terms of progress than what it would be if it was being driven by a leader who was saying do this, do this, do this, and actually allocating roles and doing a lot more of, I guess, serious stuff. My observation over the years is that both models work, and certainly the model of actually being much stronger and directive is usually much more efficient in the first place and gets things done much more quickly and gets the job done and so on. But ultimately, my impression is it doesn't actually necessarily result in an outcome of a longer term vision being achieved and sort of consolidated. And often the task will be done, the team will move on, and the vision that you might have had to actually achieve something possibly doesn't actually transpire to move on. It drifts away, and unless as a leader you actually keep pumping away at it, it just won't survive. So if you want endurance of a vision and you want it to be taken over and owned by your team, I think the empowerment model is definitely the one that needs to be followed up on, and I think that the evidence that I have now in terms of my experience is that shows that's the way. I have done actually a little video somewhere in one of my things. If I haven't, I certainly will, about this model of practice in terms of leadership, which probably is a bit more coherent. But I guess in terms of the original question, what sort of leader am I or did I turn out to be, that would be it. One who has a vision, who actually is able to now articulate that vision and is able to empower a team to actually move towards achieving that vision. That would probably be the guts of it. And I think it's worked. And probably the two things that I would say pluses about that is that when you finish doing that that bit of work, that leadership role, you leave people a lot stronger and things are much more likely to actually move on into the future in terms of your initial vision and goals. And also the way I've actually managed to achieve it, I think actually has meant that it's probably gone a little faster than what it often would for some people, that in terms of you might have a 2 to 3 year time plan to actually get a really strong team going with a vision that you want to get embedded. Might take that long to actually get it going, and it's quite a long time sometimes because the team might even last that long, or the job might not last that long, or the organisation might not last that long, but it's a long-term process. I think I've been able to actually achieve some of these things in a much shorter time frame, and that's been an achievement too. There are tricks to actually getting people empowered faster. So yeah, I think it's not actually empower slow, directive fast, but there is a bit of a gap there, but they can be actually moved along, and there are pluses and minuses on both sides. So there we are. That's the sort of leader I've turned out to be, and hopefully that's answered the question. Yeah, as I say, a bit of left field, so it's probably been a bit all over the place, but a good question to answer. And track down my other documentation on this a little bit, because I have talked about it in various places, and also this question's triggered a few other thoughts that I think I'll get down in writing and perhaps talk about a bit more in a slightly more succinct way, because that could be a good little message to give to people in a more general way. Yeah.